Hi, my name is Raven Newberry, and today we are in Denver, Colorado to talk to students, teachers, and stakeholders about the impact of financial education.
My name is Carly Urban. I am a professor of economics at Montana State University. I'm also a research fellow at the Institute for Labor Economics, and I am a researcher of financial education. I've been doing this research since before it was cool to study financial education, and most of my research really focuses on high school level financial education. So what happens after states require every student to complete personal finance instruction prior to high school graduation. This is actually kind of a crazy story. I feel like most people get into financial education because they have some type of story, right? They got into credit card debt, they had trouble, and I am just really a research nerd. I'm a data nerd. So the only reason I studied financial education 10 years ago when I first started was because I saw two papers, and one of them said financial education was effective and the other one said it wasn't. But what was really appealing to me was that in these two papers by really smart scholars, they couldn't even agree on which states did and didn't require financial education. So only a third of them matched, even though they used the exact same years. So to me, that was like, okay, these policies are complicated and we need to really understand what financial education is before we can say whether or not it's effective. Personally, I've done a lot of research studying the causal effect of financial education in high school. So what happens when states say everyone has to complete personal finance prior to graduating from high school on these long run outcomes, right? So we care about financial knowledge, but we also really care about financial behaviors. So after financial education is required, my research has largely found that credit outcomes improve and debt outcomes improve as well. So what does that mean? That means credit scores go up in the 3 to 5 years after they graduate from high school. It means that students are less likely to miss payments. So they have fewer delinquencies, and particularly 90-day delinquencies, so those severe, really far behind delinquencies. And then I also find in research that that first student loan decision that students make is better. So what does a better student loan decision mean? It means it goes from being a higher interest loan, like a credit card, that you start to pay back right away, and it moves to a lower interest, more palatable loan. So a Stafford loan, something that's subsidized by the federal government, that has a low interest rate, that's kind of guaranteed for a long time, and has potential for forgiveness in the future, we're now learning. So people are making those better decisions. Now that's my research, and then other people's research has actually corroborated that. Research by someone from the New York Fed has actually recently found that students who were required to have personal finance in high school were more likely to repay their student loans. And that's particularly true for first-gen students, students from lower income backgrounds, and students that went to public schools. So those that we might be the most worried about are actually 10 years later repaying their loans at higher rates, and that's really exciting. What I'm really excited about is trying to understand the landscape of financial education. So we can say that, everyone is required in state X to take personal finance before graduation, but what's happening in the states without policies? Right? So in the last few years, what I've done is built a full team of research assistants, undergrads who are looking at every single high school in the US and trying to figure out what they have in terms of financial education coursework. Do they have a required class? Do they have personal finance required within something else? Do they have an elective that's a personal finance class? Do they have nothing at all? And one of the most interesting things that we're finding in, again, looking at every single one of the tens of thousands of high schools across the US is that there's a lot of difference in terms of school poverty rates. So it's the schools with more students that are on free and reduced price lunch that are less likely to have that personal finance requirement. So the access is the least in areas that have the most to gain. And to me, that's really important, something really important to know, just in terms of trying to figure out how to design effective policy, right? And figure out who is missing out and why and in what ways we can improve that. I think one area that is ripe for future research is trying to understand how financial education can operate in a systemically racist financial system right? So if there is no access to a low-cost financial institution in a certain zip code and they have access to financial education, those students might still not be able to improve their financial situation, right? If you can't even get a bank account and the only thing in your area is a payday lender, then can financial education help you? And that's something that research hasn't answered yet, and I think needs to answer going forward before we can just say financial education is the solution for everyone. We need to understand for whom financial education is failing, right? So that we can reverse engineer a way for it to help those people. But I think as a field, we're so worried about people saying, financial education doesn't work, let's cut it all off, that we're not willing to really look in the mirror and say, hey, it's really not working for these people, why, right? And when we know that the financial institutions are, again, operating in this systemically racist society, we need to be careful about who is being left behind.
To learn more, visit NEFE.org.